Sato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste and good morning, everybody. Namaste, namaste. So it's the story of Vedanta from Emerson to Oppenheimer. What an interesting subject. The origins of this talk are actually, there is this Harvard club right here in Manhattan. I was also not aware of it until they invited me for a talk. It's sort of exclusive, so they don't allow taping, nor do they allow uploading of the talk. So that talk is lost. I mean, it was given there. But some people who heard it, they said, we must do it publicly. This talk should be given publicly. And that's how we are. Actually, this is more or less the same thing which I said there at the Harvard Club, but this time more openly. And the occasion for that talk, of course, was at that time, the movie Oppenheimer had been released and it was making waves, and so it was sort of topical at that time. But the story deserves to be told. It's a very interesting story. The impact that Vedanta has had, it is sort of unseen and in the background. From in the last 150 years or so, the way Vedanta has seeped into American life. Some of the finest minds, philosophers, men of and women of letters, literature, poets, writers, scientists, physicists, psychologists, filmmakers, George Lucas. So all of them, I mean, the names, Emerson, Thoreau, Walt Whitman, they are at the very source of American culture and thought and creativity. But also William James, Schrödinger, Heisenberg, then Oppenheimer, of course, and writers like Salinger. It's amazing how many of them were local, right here in New York. Salinger was here. He used to go to Swami Nikhilanandaji. Joseph Campbell was here, right here in New York, who influenced George Lucas and the whole Star Wars franchise. It's interesting how it's highbrow at one end. It is philosophers, scientists, thinkers, writers, poets. But it's also through them mass culture. It's a part of American life and culture. So it's an amazing story. Also a local story. Some of these scientists, Oppenheimer, I learned that he was right here in the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton. He was a director I asked him, was he ever? I asked a scientist. And the scientist said he was a director for 20 years right here. Salinger was here, Joseph Campbell was here, and many others. So it's a local story also for us here, people of New York. It begins with actually translations. The Bhagavad Gita being translated. Charles Wilkins made the first translation. Now, of course, so many translations are available. By one estimate, 650 translations of the Bhagavad Gita. In a recent translation which was reviewed in New York Times, the reviewer said that apparently to read the Bhagavad Gita is to be seized by an irresistible desire to translate it. But these early translations, especially Charles Wilkins' translation of the Bhagavad Gita, they proved influential in the United States because they introduced American thinkers, educated Americans at that time, to Vedanta. And so in a way prepared the ground for Vivekananda. When Vivekananda came, already the American transcendentalists were there. And people knew about Vedanta. At least some educated people, seekers, thinkers, they knew about Vedanta. So our story begins with Emerson. Emerson's importance in America cannot be overstated. Harold Bloom, the Yale scholar of literature, historian of literature and scholar of literature, he says Emerson is the mind of America. So it begins with Emerson and the Transcendentalists. This is a very quintessentially, it's an American philosophical movement, and yet entirely inspired by Vedanta. And so these Transcendentalists were those who sort of prepared the ground for Vivekananda. They welcomed Vivekananda, some of their Transcendentalists, when Vivekananda came here in 1893 and New York 1894, New England. Many of them were in New England. And it's interesting to note, Emerson founded the Transcendental Club. He founded the Transcendental Club in 1836, the birth year of Sri Ramakrishna. Coincidence. He didn't know anything about Sri Ramakrishna. So it was in 1836 that the Transcendental Club was founded. He got hold of the Bhagavad Gita. And I want to read, the reason I've got the book here, this is American Veda by Phil Goldberg, which traces the history of Hinduism and its impact on the United States, on American life and culture. And Phil actually gave a talk here about this book. The reason I'm quoting, I generally don't quote directly from books because it's boring for people. But I'm quoting because the language is so sublime. If you're going to listen to what Emerson thought about it, or Thoreau, or even Walt Whitman, you need to listen to the original words, not a paraphrase. So look, for example, Bhagavad Gita. Emerson read the Bhagavad Gita, and what did he think about it? He wrote in his journal, 1831, "It was the first of books. It was as if an empire spake to us, nothing small or unworthy, but large, serene, consistent, the voice of an old intelligence, which in another age and climate had pondered and thus disposed of the same questions which exercise us." Beautiful language. The same questions which exercise us now in another time, another civilization, another climate. Vivekananda says these are the most ancient questions. If you see the questions in the Upanishads, question which Nachiketa asks Yama, the Lord of Death, about death. What is there beyond death? Some say something exists beyond death. Others say there is nothing beyond death. You are the best teacher. You are death. You can tell us. What is the nature of reality? Who am I? What is existence? What is the meaning and point and purpose of life? So these are the deepest questions, and they generated very sophisticated answers about reality, existence, about consciousness, about meaning, value, joy, purpose in life. But Vivekananda says these questions have been asked and answered, but each generation needs to ask them again and answer it we have to answer it for ourselves. So that's what Emerson is speaking about there. A scholar of Emerson and American religion, Alan Hodder, he says, if you study Emerson's journals and the notes he made on his reading, from the plethora of entries Emerson made in his journals from the mid-40s, 1840s onwards, in the mid-40s onwards, in which he transcribed passages from his Hindu readings or reflected on their implications. He read on Hinduism more zealously than perhaps any other branch of learning during the last few decades of his life. In his later writings, it is practically, Emerson's writings, it's practically impossible to separate the Eastern and the Western components. Indian monism, Advaita Vedanta, and Western idealism, the Hindu Atman and the Western self, Oriental mysticism and Neoplatonism transmuted into Emersonian transcendentalism. If Vedanta is present, can karma be far behind? Can reincarnation be far behind? Listen to Emerson. You cannot do wrong without suffering wrong, he wrote in 1841. Treat men as pawns and ninepins, and you shall suffer as well as they. If you leave out their heart, you shall lose your own. And then, reincarnation. He writes, Emerson, discovered the secret of the world that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight and afterwards return again. One monk, I remember, he writes that these two ideas, karma and reincarnation, karmavad, punarjanmavad in Sanskrit, these are the underlying axiomatic sort of underpinnings of Indian thought. He says, contrast Hinduism and Buddhism, such stark differences. We Hindus believe in God, the Buddhists do not believe in God. We Hindus describe the self as an immortal soul, Atman, immortal, ever-existent self. And Buddhists say it is a continuous series of changes. And in spite of these tremendous differences, there are this underlying idea of karma, that cause and effect. Every action has consequences. Every effect has a cause. Every cause generates an effect. This is karma. And following from karma, birth and rebirth. If you accept causality, it follows logically that if you see a lot of effects right now, our life, it sounds very abstract, effect, cause, what are you talking about? I'm talking about our lives. If you see our lives, then there must be a cause of it, beyond the birth, before the birth in this life. And if we have done so many things in this life whose effects we have not seen, then there must be some result in the future. So past lives and future lives, Hinduism, all schools of Hinduism, enormously diverse. They all accept past lives and future lives. In Bhagavad Gita, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu, dhruvam janma mritasya cha. For those who are born, death is certain. And for those who die, birth is certain. Let's close that. So this cycle of birth and death, this is a common idea for Hindus, for Jains, for Buddhists, except the materialists. Every other school of Indian thought accepts birth and rebirth and propelled by karma. And here you have karma and rebirth in Emerson. Brahman, of course, has to be there. So Emerson writes, we live in succession, in division, in parts and particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, in which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. This Brahman is there, can Maya be far behind? Again, listen to Emerson, where he translates from the Vishnu Purana. Thy illusion beguiles all who are ignorant of thy true nature, the fools who imagine soul to be in that which is not spirit, the notions that I am and this is mine. Shankaracharya, literally, the Sanskrit, ahamidam mamayedam, what is the nature of Maya, of ignorance? I am this and this is mine. Here Emerson writes, I am and this is mine, which influence mankind, are but delusions of the mother of the world, originating in thy active agency. Even more clear, in his essay, Immortality, he actually tells the story of Yama and Nachiketa from the Kathopanishad. And most famous, of course, often quoted, is his famous poem, Brahma. Brahma. I'll quote here. If the red slayer thinks he slays, or if the slain think he is slain, they know not well the subtle ways. I keep and pass and turn again. Return again, actually, just turn again. These are translations of passages from the Bhagavad Gita and Kathopanishad. There are similar passages in the Kathopanishad and in the Bhagavad Gita. This is a beautiful poetic rendition of the same thing. Was he enlightened? A Vedantist will ask that. Of course, he read Vedanta thoroughly, and he was inspired by it, and wrote eloquently and spoke eloquently about it. But was he enlightened? Listen. His own experience he's talking about. 1837. I behold with awe and delight many illustrations of the one universal mind. I see my being embedded in it. As a plant in the earth, so I grow in God. I'm reminded of the Mundaka Upanishad. Yatha prithivyam oshadhaya sambhavanti. As from the earth, plants and shrubs and trees, they grow from the earth. Tatha ksharat sambhavati havishvam. From the imperishable, one being, comes all this universe. I am only a form of him. He is the soul of me. And then he very beautifully writes, a certain wandering light comes to me, which I instantly perceive to be the cause of causes. It transcends all proving. It is itself the ground of being. And I see that it is not one and I another. We are not separate from that. But this is the life of my life. That is one fact then, that in certain moments I have known that I existed directly from God and am, as it were, his organ. And in my ultimate consciousness, I am he. Aham Brahmasmi, from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And he says this is his direct experience. This would count as enlightenment in Vedanta. Robert Gordon, a scholar of Emerson, says, his genius was to adapt the central Vedantic teachings to the modern humanistic culture of the West, thereby creating the most cosmically optimistic faith the world has ever known. To read Emerson is to be inspired. They say that the sleeping man to read Vivekananda, if a sleeping man reads Vivekananda, they would sit up. The sitting man would stand up, and standing man would start running. And the same effect Emerson has if you read Emerson. He got into trouble. He was, of course, a Harvard scholar, and then he would teach at the Harvard Divinity School, and he was asked to give the annual address at the to the graduating class, 1838, graduating class of Harvard Divinity School. And he got kicked out because he went there and he spoke Vedanta. And he got banned from Harvard for 28 years. And by that time, he had become, of course, a superstar in America. Someone called him the god of American letters. And so Harvard could not ignore him any longer. So they invited him back with all honors. And now the philosophy department in Harvard University is called Emerson Hall. I used to spend half my time there for a few months when I was lucky enough to be there. I would spend quite a bit of my time in Emerson Hall. There's a beautiful statue of Emerson right there. And on his birthday, they treat everybody to ice cream, apparently. I had missed his birthday, but... But what did he say to get himself banned from Harvard? This is his quotation from his address to the students. Let me admonish you, first of all, to go alone, to refuse the good models, even those which are sacred in the imagination of men, and dare to love God without mediator or veil. He proposed a new metaphysics of consciousness, in which the central obstacle to fulfillment is not inherent depravity, but ignorance of our divine nature. So it is not sin, but it's ignorance. Diana Eck, who teaches Hinduism at Harvard University, she writes, in Emerson himself, the perspectives of ancient Indian Upanishads and 19th century transcendentalists came together, directing our human vision towards the oneness of spirit underlying the whole universe. Basically, the central teaching of Vedanta. Vivekananda says, what is central teaching of Vedanta? The divinity within ourselves and the oneness of all existence. Oliver Wendell Holmes, He is one of the most favorite, most popular thinkers, public intellectuals in those days. He says, the Divinity School address of Emerson was our intellectual declaration of independence. It's so central to America, he says. The author here, Phil Goldberg, says if Emerson is the mind of America, and he says two followers of Emerson, one is Thoreau, the Walden Pond. He says Thoreau is the heart of America, and Walt Whitman is the soul of America. And they were both inspired by Emerson and by Vedanta. Then comes Thoreau. If you've gone to Walden Pond, I got a chance to visit Walden Pond and the cabin and everything. He went to Walden Pond and he took with him the Bhagavad Gita. And then he writes, listen to, this is Henry David Thoreau. Listen to Thoreau. The Bhagavad Gita was a constant companion in his days of silence. There's a beautiful passage from Walden. He writes, in the morning, I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, since whose composition years of the gods have elapsed, and in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seems puny and trivial. He praises the Gita's sanity and sublimity, and he writes, the reader is raised into and sustained in a bigger, purer, or rarer region of thought. He had the biggest library of Vedanta in those days in America. 44 books shipped by a British friend of his. Because of the East India Company, they had access to books in India, and then some of them are translated. And then, so to think that they have 44 books of Vedanta in the early 19th century, that's pretty big. He had 44 books, and when he died, those books were passed on to Emerson. So they became part of Emerson's library. It's the finest Indian philosophy library in the American continent at that time, 44 books. In Walden, Thoreau writes, it's a beautiful language, you see. What extracts from the Vedas I have read fall on me like the light of a higher and purer luminary, which describes a loftier course through a purer stratum. Whenever I have read any part of the Vedas, I have felt that some unearthly and unknown light illuminated me. In the great teaching of the Vedas, there is no touch of sectarianism. It is of all ages, climes, and nationalities, and it is the royal road for the attainment of the great knowledge. He thought of himself as a yogi. He knew the word yoga, and he writes himself, rude and careless as I am, I would fain practice yoga faithfully. Phil Goldberg calls him America's first yogi, America's first sannyasi, because he lived as a hermit. And then he writes to a friend, Thoreau, to some extent at rare intervals, even I am a yogi. Then comes Walt Whitman, America's beloved poet. Leaves of Grass. We have read, it's part of English literature courses all over the world. Even as a school student, I read part of it, The Song of Me and all of that. When he wrote it, it was panned. It was panned by critics everywhere. Silly joke, but I'm compelled to tell you this. I read it recently, so it's a nice joke. So the author of Peter Pan, he was asked, how does he deal with failure by a critic? So he said, well, my books and plays, some of them peter out, but others pan out. I know, it's a good one. So it was panned by critics and scoffed. Luckily, one copy came into the hands of Emerson, who was by that time a god of American letters. And Emerson wrote a review. He said, "It is the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom that America has yet contributed." And he writes to Walt Whitman, "I greet you at the beginning of a great career." Prophetic. Thoreau. So Emerson passed it on to Thoreau. Read this new poet, young poet. And Thoreau wrote, "Whitman has spoken more truth than any American or modern that I know." And later, of course, Emerson and Thoreau and Whitman, they got to meet in person. Whitman says that he read ancient Hindu poems. And in 1857, he writes, "India represents meditation, oriental rhapsody, passiveness, a curious schoolmaster teaching of wise precepts." In his poem Passage to India, he exalts India's myths and fables, far darting beams of the spirit, these are quotations, and unloosened dreams, and deep diving Bibles and legends. Let me quote from Song of Myself. This is Whitman. "I see something of God each hour of the 24, and each moment then. In the faces of men and women, I see God, and in my own face in the glass. I find letters from God dropped in the street, and every one is signed by God's name. And I leave them where they are, for I know that wherever I go, others will punctually come forever and ever." Swami Vivekananda says, "We Hindus worship a God who is transcendent and immanent, beyond time, space, and causation, beyond this universe, beyond creatures, but also in and through." This is what distinguishes Hinduism. So all of creation, all of this universe, all of us is permeated by this divinity. And you see that idea, that it's not just an idea, it's a poetic intuition, a mystic intuition, which permeates Leaves of Grass, The Song of Me, these poems. Diane Ackerman, the author and poet, she says, "Leaves of Grass is a sacred American text about the essential goodness and perfectibility of people, the sanctity of the common man, the holiness of the human body, the privilege of democracy, and the need to forge one's own destiny, and the duty of all to discover the world anew by living in a state of rampant amazement at the endless pocket-sized miracles one encounters every day." This is basically the immanence of the divine. You find it in everybody, in everything, in every experience of life. It's there. All our journeys in spiritual life, it seems we are going away from lived life. But one needs to withdraw and step back in order to discover the divinity within us, in silence, in withdrawal, in meditation. But then in spiritual life, you not only have to go away, you have to come back also. And when you come back, you see it everywhere. The same divinity which you had discovered in meditation, in philosophical inquiry, in prayer, that you discover with eyes open. Sri Ramakrishna would say, "With my eyes closed, I see God. With eyes open, God is not there." What kind of God would that be? He says, when you, at first one climbs to the roof of the house and sees that what material the roof is made of, the bricks and the wood and the brick dust. And when one comes down, what one has left behind, the staircase and the ground floor and the door, all of that one discovers is made of the same material. This is what Sri Ramakrishna calls Vijnana. If you inquire deeply, you will find the same divinity everywhere, in every experience. The Kena Upanishad says, "Pratibodha viditam matam, amritatvam hi vindate." In every experience we discover the same divinity, one attains to immortality. You see this in Walt Whitman. Emerson is credited with the two well-known great schools of American philosophy, pragmatism and process philosophy. At the source of that is Emerson. Cornel West, he is, I attended one of his talks at Harvard University. He was at Harvard at that time. He is very Emersonian himself. In fact, he's called modern Emersonian. I was actually a little taken aback. He's lecturing, the whole approach is very 19th century. So I was thinking, then I realized he is emulating Emerson. And he says about Emerson, the towering man of letters in the American democratic experiment. Harold Bloom again, who said Emerson is the mind of America. He says, if God appeared in 19th century America, it was as Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is Bloom. The whole phenomenon of American culture on every level down to popular culture is a profoundly Emersonian affair. He has prophesied everything. He is the mind of America. Down to our Lion King and Star Wars, the Matrix movies, the inner idea, the Vedantic ideas in and through all of this. The Encyclopedia Britannica says that Emerson is quoted more than any other American. And he gives a list of people who have openly acknowledged their debt to Emerson. Not just Thoreau and Whitman, but Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Nietzsche, Alfred North Whitehead, William James. William James, he says he bounced on Emerson's knee as a child. Poetry. Take a little detour into poetry. I'm going to talk about Yeats and Eliot, but before that, poets, the greatest poets in the Western canon, William Blake, Shelley, Wordsworth, Coleridge. There is no clear indication that they were ever exposed to Vedantic texts. But it could be their own poetic intuition. It could certainly be more plausibly the exposure to idealistic philosophers in the West. And you find line after line in their poetry, which is full of Vedantic thoughts. What can be described as Vedantic thoughts? One I have quoted often, William Blake, very beautiful. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. William Blake. W.B. Yeats, of course, he was well grounded in Vedanta. He actually wrote books. He translated the Upanishads, one of the well-regarded translations of Upanishads. So his Vedanta came from three sources. One is a theosophist, Mohini Chatterjee. But of course, most famously, it was Rabindranath Tagore, his collaboration. Both were Nobel laureates, Yeats and Tagore. His collaboration with Rabindranath Tagore, translating Tagore's works and writing back and forth. All right. Funny detour again. Again, I can't resist this. Rabindranath Tagore, it's an anglicized form. Tagore is an anglicized form of the original Bengali Thakur. So in Bengal, he is known as Rabindranath Thakur, Robi Thakur. So Thakur, the same word which we use for Sri Ramakrishna, Thakur. Now, I remember way back, a scholar had come, a Bengali scholar was giving a talk in our college in near Belur Math, our main monastery on the bank of the Ganga near Calcutta. This scholar who had come from Bangladesh, he was saying, stop saying Rabindranath Tagore. Yeah, Robi Thakur, Rabindranath Thakur. If you don't stop saying that, I shall start calling Sri Ramakrishna Tagore. Ramakrishna Thakur, Ramakrishna Tagore. And my point now, that Google has understood that more than us. I see again and again, in the YouTube comments to my lectures and other lectures by other Swamis, often Bengalis will write in Bengali, Joy Thakur. Google immediately translates as victory to Tagore. So Bengalis will often write, may Thakur's, Thakurer Ashirwad apnar opore Thakur, may Thakur's blessings be on you. Immediately Google translates it as, may Tagore's blessings be on you. May Tagore be with you forever. It's a bit like, may the force be with you. Another source of his Vedanta, Yeats' Vedanta, was Purohit Swami, a monk, Indian monk whom he got to know, Sri Purohit Swami. And Yeats wrote the introduction to his biography, Purohit Swami's autobiography. He wrote the introduction to Purohit Swami's translation, one of the earliest translations of Mandukya Karika, a very difficult Upanishad and text. Mandukya Upanishad, Mandukya Karika. His translation of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And Yeats wrote the introduction. And Yeats actually worked with Purohit Swami and translated the Upanishads, 10 principal Upanishads. Even now it's a highly regarded, beautifully translated text. Now we come to Eliot, T.S. Eliot, of course, one of the biggest names in modern English poetry, not just American, but modern English poetry. He went to Harvard too, and he studied there for 2 years. Do you know what he studied? Vedanta. Yes, Sanskrit and Vedanta, and he also took a course in Pali language, but he learned Sanskrit there. He learned Vedanta there. And it says that he learned it, this book says he learned it from one of the most noted scholars in the world at that time. So I did a little bit of research yesterday. Whom did he learn it from? And it turned out it's none other than Charles Landman, who headed the Sanskrit department at Harvard University at that time. And why is that important? Go back to Swami Abhedanandaji's Vedanta Society of New York, his reminiscences. He talks about going to Harvard and meeting William James and a dinner at William James' home, where there is William James, Charles Landman, and Josiah Royce, who was the greatest of the American idealist philosophers. Very interesting connection. This Royce, great idealist philosopher, when he was a young student, he met Vivekananda in the World Parliament of Religions. And later on also he might have met Vivekananda. He went on to become a very great philosopher. William James, of course, was the one who invited Vivekananda to give his famous address at Harvard University. And Charles Landman. I don't know if Landman actually met Vivekananda, but he knew Vedanta very well. Then he talks about 3-hour argument. On one side is Josiah Royce, Charles Landman, and Swami Abhedananda. On the other side is William James. Royce, Landman, and Abhedananda are all recommending Advaita Vedanta, monism. And William James is sticking to his pluralism. Now, according to Abhedanandaji's biography, at the end, no, this is another work on the early history of Vedanta. At the end, the Professor William James, was forced to acknowledge the force of the Swami's arguments. So it's the same Charles Landman who later taught Eliot. And then there are notes. Eliot writes when he's studying Vedanta, he says that the subtleties of these ancient Indian sages make our European philosophers look like schoolboys. And then, of course, his poems. In the 4 quartets in Burnt Norton, you find the still point of the turning world. I was again revising the poem yesterday. Not just that oft-quoted line. There are many points in which there's deep philosophy, the non-causality, the still point, which he qualifies then, Eliot. He says, not being approached to or coming out of. Being approached to something and coming out of is causality, cause and effect. But the still point is beyond cause and effect. But he puts it very poetically and very precisely. Time past and time future. But it is all here, he says, in time present. And he repeats that thing again and again and again. And then, of course, his famous Wasteland is T.S. Eliot's masterpiece. We had read it in English literature as kids, part of it. And there he writes about the futility of modern life and the solution to the meaninglessness of modern life in spirituality. And then he quotes directly from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. He writes, the creator, Brahma, he created the races of human beings and the races and the gods and the demons. the devatas and the asuras and the human beings, Nara. And they all approach their grandfather, Brahma. Please advise us, give us the secret of life. Advise us. And so Brahma speaks to them in the, Eliot says, in the voice of thunder. What did the thunder say? Da, da, da. What does it mean? Datta, dayadhvam, damyata. For human beings, your main weakness is miserliness, smallness, clutching, pettiness. So, datta, give. Be generous. Open up. Swami Vivekananda says, give, for it shall be taken from you. Give, and do not look back. For those who look back, their ocean dwindles to a drop. So that's how you expand, by letting go. Sri Ramakrishna's simple advice to the Holy Mother. He says, telling her that I'm going, I'll be gone, and after me, how do you live? One of the instructions he gave to her, in the midst of acute poverty also. He says, never do this, ask. No, always this, give. So so Brahma says to human beings, datta, give. And to the demons, the asuras, who are cruel, who oppress and torture others, dayadhvam, be compassionate. Be compassionate. And to the gods, those who are having a blast in heaven, in a heavenly life. So, on Billionaires Row, on the 100th floor up there, somebody said, is the building swaying? Yes, it's meant to sway. So even heaven sways a little bit. He says to them, damyata, control yourselves. Life is passing by. You're engrossed in partying. Things are so good. But you're not looking deeply. And this will come to all of it will come to an end. There's a beautiful descriptions of how heaven comes to an end. For those who are born in... See, these are all births we go through. So we also have been born as gods in various heavens. And that too comes to an end. And when it comes to an end, the problem with heaven is there's no old age. There's no disease. There's no suffering. So how is that a problem? The problem is there's no warning. Everything is very nice. And when it comes to an end, it's sudden. It's finished. Your credit has run out. You're expelled. And so they fall from heaven. It's a description, graphic. Crying, alas, alas. In Sanskrit, ha, ha, kar. Alas, alas, they fall from heaven. So, Eliot quotes this, da, da, da. And at the end, he ends with shanti, shanti, shanti. The Sanskrit shanti, shanti, not in English, the Sanskrit. And he says, he comments, this is the peace that passeth understanding, connecting it to the Bible. There's a lot more, but now we must come to Oppenheimer. Huh? The connection between science and Vedanta, it starts with Vivekananda. He was well read. In fact, one of the things which surprised people when he came and he made a big impact on American society after the World Parliament of Religions, his encyclopedic learning, not only in religion, not only in philosophy, but in modern science. And he struck up friendships with Tesla, not the car, the scientist. Recently I saw in Manhattan itself, there's a Nikola Tesla corner. We passed by it a few days ago. So with the scientist, and Tesla would come to listen to his talks. In the World Parliament of Religions, Tesla had a pavilion, Edison also had a pavilion. Both were geniuses, of course, but Edison was more of a commercial genius, and Tesla was more of the mystic, idealistic kind. So Tesla would shut down his pavilion and come to Vivekananda's talk. There are accounts of it. He would stand at the back, just listen to Vivekananda's talk and go away after that. And then they struck up a correspondence. The correspondence is still available. In one letter, Vivekananda writes that I'm going to meet Tesla. He has promised to demonstrate mathematically how matter is energy. Tesla didn't succeed. At that time, physics was not advanced enough. Vivekananda did not live to see it. He died in 1902. 1905, E is equal to mc square. Einstein proves it. The author here says, when Vivekananda writes this, matter and energy are the same thing, at that time this was a crazy idea. Clearly, matter is matter and energy is energy, and all school children were taught the conservation of matter and the conservation of energy separately, which is now different for school. When we were school children, it's matter and energy, conservation of matter and energy. Within years, just within 3 years of Vivekananda's passing, Einstein proves it. A little aside about Einstein, we don't have any information about what Einstein thought of Vedanta, how much he knew about Vedanta, but he was in direct contact with Swami Nikhilananda. I have myself seen 3 letters written by Einstein to Swami Nikhilanandaji when he was here in. You can go and see his house, Einstein's house in Princeton. Yeah, so they corresponded. They met more than once, and but we don't know his exact opinions. Although he does say in a famous line, someone asked him, does he believe in God, spirituality? He says, no, but the God I believe in is Spinoza's God. So Spinoza's God is, of course, very Vedantic, the one immanent divinity in the entire universe. More forthright was Schrödinger, who was sort of at the source of quantum mechanics. And listen to Schrödinger. This is why I've got the book, so that you can listen to his exact words. Schrödinger writes, Vedanta, he uses the word Vedanta. Vedanta teaches that consciousness is singular. Not many consciousnesses, but consciousness is singular, it's one consciousness. All things, all happenings are played out in one universal consciousness, and there is no multiplicity of selves. This is literally Advaita Vedanta. This life of yours, which you are living, is not merely a piece of this entire existence, but in a certain sense the whole. What the Brahmins of India express in that sacred mystic formula, which is yet really so simple and so clear. Tat Tvam Asi. He writes in Sanskrit. Tat Tvam Asi. This is you. Schrödinger, he wrote, he expressed the hope that a blood transfusion from the East will cure the West's spiritual anemia. Heisenberg, he writes, one cannot always distinguish between statements made by Eastern metaphysics based on mystical insight and the pronouncements of modern physics based on observations, experiments, and mathematical calculations. In Geneva, at the CERN, it is the largest device constructed by humanity underground across Switzerland and part of France, is the particle accelerator. So on the lawn outside, you will see Nataraja, Shiva, the dancing Shiva, big sculpture of Nataraja. And there, on the sculpture there is a quotation from Ananda Kumar Swami and from Fritjof Capra, saying that this represents the perfect fusion of ancient mystic insight, mythology, of religious art, and modern physics, which depicts the dance of the cosmos. Even right here, our Brian Greene, who is in Columbia, is a cosmologist. I met him once and I asked him about it. The cosmology that you find in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, and modern physics, what do you think about it? He knows about it because his brother is a monk, a Hindu monk, actually. So he said, what you are saying is not science, but it is a poetic rendition of what we are doing now in science. It's a poetic rendition, he said, a poetic echo. It's good enough. Yeah. So, this is Heisenberg. And we come to our hero, Oppenheimer. There's just a paragraph about him here. But I went to another book, American Prometheus, which actually got a Pulitzer Prize, I think, in biography. So there, I found we know about his interest in the Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta, but it's not known how deep his interest was. As a student, a Sanskrit professor, he learned Sanskrit at Berkeley with this professor who introduced him to the Bhagavad Gita. And he read it in the original Sanskrit. And he would translate, the same irresistible desire to translate the Bhagavad Gita. He would sometimes translate it for the benefit of friends and other interlocutors. And Oppenheimer writes, "It is the most beautiful philosophical song in any known tongue." In any language of the world, it is the most beautiful philosophical song. And he got a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, which he kept till the end of his life. He had a small library which he took with him wherever he went, and the Bhagavad Gita was always part of it. And he would hand it out, copies of the Bhagavad Gita, to his friends. I'm sure he made a bore out of himself, but nice little anecdotes, like his father bought him a car, a Chrysler in those days. And he used to drive very fast. And he named the Chrysler Garuda. The bird on which Vishnu flies, so Garuda. Another very interesting anecdote was when Roosevelt died. Already the Manhattan Project had started to make the atom bomb. Again, little aside. In Boston, I went on a very curious tour. I was taken by two scientists into even Bostonians don't know, there is an underground nuclear facility under Boston. And so there's a fusion reactor there and so on. So they took me in, and tunnels which have not been used since the Manhattan Project. There's just a plaque in one place, for example, here so-and-so scientists did work which got them the Nobel Prize. But the labs are not there, offices are not there, nothing, just dimly lit tunnels. So we walked through it, and I saw some old, like garbage. I thought, what's there? And the scientist said, don't go near it, it's radioactive waste. And very interesting things. So the Manhattan Project had started. And of course, Oppenheimer was the scientific head of it, of the Manhattan Project. Then Roosevelt died. The President of the United States, he died, after which Truman became the president. He didn't mince words, Oppenheimer. He said, Roosevelt was an architect. I hope Truman will be a carpenter. Will be at least a carpenter. So anyway, then he admired Roosevelt. So Oppenheimer organized a memorial meeting for Roosevelt. And in the memorial meeting for Roosevelt, with all the military people and the scientists gathered together in the Manhattan Project, he quoted from the Bhagavad Gita. Yo yat shraddha saeva sa. Shraddhamayam ayam purushaha. Yo yat shraddha saeva sa. From the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, I think. A person is constituted by his faith. So what you deeply believe in, what you are convinced about, deeply, sincerely, that's what will determine you. That's for your makeup. That will construct your personality. Your life will be built of that. Shraddhamayam ayam purusha. This being is pervaded, is constituted of shraddha, of faith, of conviction. Yo yat shraddha saeva sa. Whatever your shraddha is, whatever your faith or belief or conviction is, that you are. And aside, right here I remember upstairs, Swami Tathagatanandaji. I asked him about his deepest conviction. And he said that the Advaita conviction that I am Brahman. He said, I am Brahman. I am convinced. He said, it was a tremendous force. I still remember there. I am convinced of it 100%. I have no doubt at all. Yo yat shraddha saeva sa. What your conviction is, what your deepest held faith is, not intellectual concepts. Unshakable belief. Body, then we are body. And we live and die with the body. Mind, yes, then we are mind. But we will go through the ups and downs of the mind, flickering of the mind. But if you're spirit, if you're consciousness, if you're being, then you are one with God. Then another interesting episode, of course, is which has been immortalized in film and in books and in journalistic accounts and anecdotes, when the first atom bomb explosion happened. But many people don't know. Before that, there was to alleviate the tension, Oppenheimer writes, he got people together to relax them and translated from the Gita for them. I don't know if it relaxed them or bored them. And on the day of the explosion, when they saw the light of the first nuclear explosion on Earth, that's why he's called American Prometheus. Prometheus is the Greek legend, the one who brought divine fire to the human beings. So here is Oppenheimer, who brought the fire, the light of the fire of the stars, of the cosmos, to mortal hands. When the first explosion took place, he quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, from the 11th chapter, where, that Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga, where Arjuna, having heard 10 chapters, teachings is over, Arjuna says, I believe you. You are an incarnation of God. And there is this one cosmic being from which the universe proceeds, in which the universe subsists, and into which the universe will one day disappear. I believe all of that. And you are that divine reality. I believe that. Incredible as it may sound. But I have a request. I want to see. I want to experience it for myself. And Krishna says, all right, be careful what you ask for. Be careful what you ask for. In the Bible it is said, no man may look upon the face of God and live. What Arjuna asked was, I want to look upon the face of God. And then Krishna shows him. And he says, it was there the poetry of the Bhagavad Gita reaches its climax. Extraordinary, vivid. The poet outdoes himself in order to describe the divine glory. Language, Devi Sahasra Suryasya Yugapaduttita, as if in the sky 1,000 suns rise at once. Oppenheimer quotes that, the light of the first atomic explosions, as if 1,000 suns appeared in the sky. If you look into one sun, you're dazzled. Imagine 1,000 suns. Arjuna says, this is what Arjuna is experiencing. He says, every hair on my body is standing on its end. I quiver and tremble. The entire earth trembles. What did he see? One of the commentators says, he basically saw the universe, all of it, all at once. Imagine, we are seeing, like Emerson himself. Emerson himself says, when he describes what Brahman is, we live in bits and pieces and parcels. Right now we are here, which means we are not there, we are not outside, we are not in Central Park, we are just seeing this. We are seeing these people, but we are not seeing anybody else. And then we will see something else after this. We have seen something else before this, and so on through our lives. It is a journey in limited time, limited space, with limited experiences of objects and people. But suppose you were to see all of it, all together, at once. Imagine all beings in the universe, in the world, 8 billion human beings. And billions of other living beings, from elephants to whales to insects, whatnot, plants, and all the gods in heavens and all the demons in hells, all of them, let's be more modern, all the aliens in different planets and all of them together, they come together in one being, and that being turns around and looks at you. How will you feel? So Arjuna says, like 1,000 suns rising in the sky together. This is my mind is reeling, my heart quivers, the very earth trembles when it, when you walk on it. And he says, I am come time, the destroyer of worlds. Oppenheimer quoted that. I am the destroyer of worlds. He's talking about the nuclear explosion, of course. Later on to, I think, Life magazine, in an interview, he mentioned that this is what he thought of. And though actually whether he did recite the brighter than 1,000 suns, or it might be the name of a book which was written about the event later on, so it became popularized. But anyway, he did think of the Gita, and he did recite that I have come time, the destroyer of worlds, and all of that. So Arjuna didn't die, luckily. And he prayed to Krishna that I want to see you in your wholesome human form again, not in this form. And Krishna was, all right, back to his form. So this is an amazing story, and it still continues. And it's renewed. In our age, in our time, what has happened is this is the age of artificial intelligence, chat GPT and the internet. and a renewed interest in what does it mean to be a human being. What is consciousness? So for the last 20, 25 years, there's a renewed interest in consciousness. Consciousness studies is a big thing now, a really big deal now. The nature of consciousness. Why is it that we are unable to get a traction on the problem? We have now generated machines, AI, which can do stuff which we thought were actually human. Creativity. We thought, yes, physical power machines can do. A crane can lift much more than a human being. That's all right, because as physically we are not strong, we are weak. All right, calculators can calculate faster than us. But thinking, comprehension, creativity, writing, novels and painting pictures and creating movies and writing songs, all of this creativity, higher faculties of the human being. Machines will free us from that, from our labors. They will do all the boring jobs. I saw recently, just walking down Columbus, big advertisement. The age of AI employees is here. Don't hire human beings anymore. Don't hire humans to do jobs they don't want to do. Hire AI employees. So the age of AI employees is here. Now we find the reverse is happening. Blue-collar jobs are there. You can go and be a barista in Starbucks and be a worker in the Amazon warehouse. But writing poems and directing movies and writing songs, AI is saying, I will do it. You can clean the machines and make sure that I've plugged into electricity, but I'll do all the human. So what does it mean to be human? And it has been narrowed down, the question has been narrowed down to the question of consciousness. I mean, even art. Once I went last year to the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, and we went in there. In front there was a big display of modern art and generated by a computer. At first you're transfixed, and then there's a note which says, what is that installation? It's an AI which has been programmed. All the modern art in the Metropolitan Museum has been dumped into that AI, and the AI has been told, keep generating modern art. So it's generating modern art. And it's fascinating. If you didn't know it, people are going there and you can see their behavior. They are standing entranced. Is it art? Big question. You can write essays. The problem is, if you ask students to write the essay, they will ask AI to write the essay. And that's happening. A survey was taken recently in the streets of New York, outside the university, students coming out. How many of your friends use AI for their assignments? And they were like, man, everybody. So everybody is using it. So what does it mean to be human? Is there any answer? There is. Consciousness. Consciousness. So what is consciousness? Why is it impossible to generate consciousness artificially? What is the link between the brain and the consciousness? There is a link. But is the brain producing consciousness, or is the brain channeling consciousness? Is consciousness fundamental? Is consciousness an epiphenomenon? And then you suddenly see Vedanta 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago talking about consciousness. The same questions. In a different way. In a cutting-edge lab in a university, which I'll go nameless, I'm not allowed to disclose. So the latest robots, scientists working on these robots powered by AI. I asked the people, why are you designing the robots so human-like? They are machines, so make them machine-like. Like a dishwasher is a machine. So you want a robot to do dishwashing, make it like a dishwasher. I said, no. A very interesting answer. I didn't think of it. They said these robots are being designed to be introduced into human spaces. They'll be at home, in the classroom, in the workshop, in the office, in your cars. And those are all designed for human beings. So a human-formed robot is actually it's not just for aesthetics or not just to make it appealing. No, it's the most economically viable, technologically also reasonable thing to do, to make it like a human being. And all sorts of weird, I'm going a little away from the topic, but it's interesting, weird experiences. All the robots, in one sense, they're all naked because they're all metal, but they're all wearing sneakers. I said, why? Sneakers. But they don't wear clothes, just wearing sneakers. They said because when they walk, it's scary. Because they're metal. So when they're walking on the wooden floor or on a carpet, they sound like a platoon of soldiers marching down. And somehow to maintain their balance, they don't stand steady. They keep doing this. Now, why am I saying this? One lab, there is this AI and a robot. Luckily, it's not a full robot, just a hand. But it's also very eerie just to see the hand. And it's trying to sense its environment. So they have given it a cup, a hammer, like a chocolate bar, a flower, things like that. And it's trying to sense what they are. They are very poor at it. There's an AI which scans to see and understand what is the environment like. AI, very powerful AI, lab level. So I was put there to stand there. The AI scanned me. After quite some time, few minutes, 2-3 minutes it took. Then finally, 48% probability, it's a person. That's the level. And so the AI is trying to sense its environment. You know how it's sensing? One sensor is with lens and camera trying to see. Another sensor, but the one which I saw was sound. Like we as human beings, we immediately understand if I do this, one sound. If I do this, another sound. Immediately we understand, we have a feel for what kind of material I touched. But the computer doesn't know. The AI doesn't know. For it, it's just a surface. The different materials have different tensile capacities. How will they know? And you might say, why is it a problem? The problem is, I interacted with some robots, and all the robots have labels there. How far away from the robot you should stand. Because it can actually kill you without knowing. So some are like 10 centimeters, some are like 20 centimeters, you stand away. And it's written clearly, no pets or children allowed near these robots. Because inadvertently. It happened recently. One robot was playing chess. And robot means not computer chess. That's very well known. Actual robot with hand playing chess. And so AI powered. What it does is it picks up just like a human being, picks up the piece and moves it and removes the other piece from there. Now what happened was the human player against whom the robot was playing, the human player picked up a piece and put it there. And the robot's been programmed, wait for them to finish, and then you can do your move. But this human player, what he did was a very human thing. Put it there and it's hot. Should I put it here? And the robot has thought that you have finished your move. And the human being removed his hand and then put it back again, trying to change the move or think about it again. And the robot grabbed that piece to remove it. He put his own piece there, grabbed that piece, caught hold of the human being's finger, twisted and broke it. So you have to let the robot know the strength and the softness and the pliability, the tensile strength of the materials which it's handling. Okay, so this is the job. How difficult it is, I saw. What is the problem given to the PhD students? How to make it see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Not yet smell, but touch definitely. And I was immediately reminded, 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, the Kena Upanishad starts. What is it that by which we can touch, smell, taste, think, hear? Keneshitam patati preshitam mana kena prana pratama praiti yukta keneshitam vachamimam vadanti chakshu shrotram kaudeva yunakti. What bright being is there which gives us the experience of hearing, of seeing, of speaking, of thinking? It is the mirror image of the same problem. What they are trying to do in the lab is, without consciousness, just the behavior of it. And I saw something interesting. The scientists and the PhD students working on that, many of them are very interested in the question of consciousness. What is consciousness? You can be not interested when you're working with problems like this. But the way the problems are framed and the way the budgets are framed, consciousness is no part of it. So this is where we are at. This is sort of cutting edge work going on. We will see. We are asking the same questions all over again, which were asked, as Soros says, in the dawn of civilization, in the morning of civilization. And the light, we will see that light again in our own lifetimes in a new way, answers fitted to the questions we are asking in our own generation. I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Ma Sharada Devi, Swami Vivekananda to bless us all. May we ask these questions seriously. May this wisdom, as Thoreau says, the great knowledge, may it dawn upon us, and may our lives be blessed. May we become a blessing for everybody else. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.